Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone is safe and sound this season. I welcome everyone to this webinar hosted by Sashi Creative Institute of Design. And today's webinar is the sixth one in the series called Design Interactions. And today's topic will be Barefoot Design. You can check the previous series of this design interactions in our website, www.scid.ac.in. And the webinar is presented by Professor Balram sir, and he's a well-known person in the design field. He's a designer and educator and is currently the design director in Sashi Creative Institute of Design. I welcome sir. So good afternoon, and you can take it from here.
Thank you, Akshaya, and thank you for everybody for coming to attend this webinar, which is 6 in the series. Before we start, I would like to tell some regulars who may be attending all of my webinars. There may be some ideas which will be repeated, so please kindly bear with me. This webinar, as usual, we will start with a Mullah story. This time I have picked up a story of Mullah, which goes like this. Mullah was working with the king in his court once, and the king used to have a very good musician, the court musician. He was a well-known man, and he used to be excellent, but he is a very old, grand old man. The grand old musician one day died suddenly. So there is a vacancy for a musician. So some people who didn't like Mullah want to make fun of Mullah and told the king, "Sir, Mullah sometimes hums. He knows music. So why can't we appoint him as a musician, court musician?" So the king believed and asked Mullah, "Why don't you be our court musician?" Mullah needs the money desperately. Whether he knows music or not, it doesn't matter. So he said, "Sir, okay, I will be the musician if you say so, but I should be paid 3 times more than the other musician which you are paying." So the king is surprised. "Mullah, you hardly have any experience. You should be happy. I am asking you to be the musician. Your predecessor who died has got a lot of experience, and he's a well-known man. He made so many compositions, and for him music came just like that. He's very gifted and all that." Then Mullah said, "Jahapna, precisely that. He is a gifted man and music came to him naturally. He doesn't have to work for it. Now, I'm a poor man, I'm not gifted in music, but if I have to be in his shoes, I have to work very, very, very hard. Don't you think so? So therefore, I should be paid much more than the man who has passed away." So this is how, we normally pay for the experience and the expertise and the efficiency. But can we look at the other way? For the effort one puts it, if something comes to an experienced man effortlessly, probably he should be paid more. Mullah is saying that the struggle which one is putting to reach somewhere should be paid more. Let us keep this at the back of our minds, and let us look at the design very quickly, the way design has journeyed so far. We all know people who are in the design field, either students or faculty or designers, they know about how design has started and how it has become. It started with form follows function, the famous statement we heard and heard and heard. Then it is soon got into form follows fun. Particularly postmodernists thought, they got bored with function, form, function, form. Then it has gone little further and has become form is function. Then people saying that. Then there are also other things like less is more. Once it is a kind of the Charles Sims times, data rams, those times is less is more is the big thing. Then the postmodernists have come on the scene and they said less is a bore. Then the particularly American saying is more is more. So these things have been there. But there are also other things like minimalism, and there is also something like small is beautiful by E.F. Shoemaker from England. And there is also simplicity is beauty. We had many of them, but all these things have remained as just laudable concepts. Till we came to 70s, in 1970s, a great man called Victor Papanek from USA became a champion of the real world. So he wrote a mind-blowing book, as you all know, some of you may have read it. It's called Design for the Real World. But it is his idea of real world. The book is very, very popular, particularly with young people, because it's very emotionally charged them. And it is published in 12 world languages, and it is tremendously successful. So that way he has done a service. His idea is to focus attention of the world designers on the real world, so-called real world, which is actually majority world. The developing countries, China, India, Brazil, and all of them together would make majority population in the world. And he was saying that the design is not caring for them. But it is his idea of imagined real world. It's not a real world, because his idea is he came with the tin can radio and all that. He has no idea what is the situation in the so-called the poor developing countries or the real world, which he calls it. So then what happened was, this real world has been challenged, and India, when it comes, let us see what is our idea of yeah. One second. Yeah, what is India's, let us take India. What is India's complexity? This India's complexity is plurality of culture, of language, of food and dress and so on and on. That is the uniqueness. And the second one is the coexistence of modernity as well as tradition. We have Chandrayaan on one hand, and still the thousands of years old bullock cart also at the same time being functional, and it is not gone anywhere. It is still there in the fields and in villages. And then we have another complexity, which is uniquely Indian. We have mass production, and mass production never, ever eliminated the manual production. So we have mass production on one hand and manual production, the smiths and the carpenters and the craft production also same time. The other one is unique to this country is it's an agriculture-based economy. That is very, very important because monsoons are very important. They, sometimes decide the country's fate. And lastly, the abundance of manpower. The abundance of manpower, the word is carefully used here. This abundance could be a problem. This abundance could be a positive thing as an advantage. But that is what we are. That is what India is. What happened was architecture in this country by legendary architects like Le Corbusier, Louis Kahn, etc. They made monuments, beautiful monuments, and forever they're tourist attractions. But not fit as Laurie Baker's architecture was. And Indian architects and designers simply followed it because they trained in the West, and some of them have apprenticed with these great architects, and they followed their way. Realizing this, Charles Ames' report called for creating the lotus of modern India. It's very important because why he chose Lota and why he hasn't prescribed you do this way, you do that way, because he believed that the Indians know what is good for India. Now, the India is not actually one India. Many people said many times, it is two Indias we live in. One is called India, INDIA. Another one is called Bharat. Now the divide is like this. It is urban India and rural India. 68.8% is rural. So now you can imagine how little is urban and how much is rural. Again, rich and poor is again also 68.8%, the last statistics. So there also it is 70% poor. And many of them are, live on $2 per day expense. And then we have literate and illiterate population. 74% are still illiterate in this country. That is the India's present profile. So all that, what does it mean to design? It means that design is seen as for the rich, of the rich, and by the rich. The reasons are not anybody else, but the system itself is like that. All the design colleges are located in cities. All the design colleges or design activity in the country is projected as a glossy, very glamorous activity. You have fashion shows. Those who have seen the film, a beautiful film, Oscar award-winning film called Devil Wears Prada, will know that how design is projected as a glossy, high, very high-profile profession. I have a suspicion that many people join design because they want to be in that high-profile spot. The curriculum naturally is urban. It is oriented about urban problems because it's located in urban. It knows mostly urban. And fourthly, it's a minority because the design curriculum doesn't have the content of rural resources, rural psychology, rural culture, and all that. It doesn't tell about rural materials like grass or mud or bamboo and other things, and rural skills. Many of the urban students don't even know what it is like to be in a village. For them, it is a foreign country. There is also insecurity. Those few people have kind of somehow managed to come to city and try to be there, try to study there. They soon develop the insecurity feeling, and they have this minority complex because they are minority. They don't know how to drink, how to sing English songs, how to dance, and how to go to parties. And they were trying desperately, many of them, to urbanize, either urbanize or get ejected. That is the thing. And many of them go to the extent, I have seen this happening in my teaching. Some people have destroyed themselves completely. The drugs and getting into the easy targets of that. Then in this, there is at NID, Professor Bhandari and we all have started a course realizing this, that the student should know something about villages. And we have started a course called Rural Exposure. It is named several times, several ways: living with people at DJ Academy of Design, and environmental exposure at NID, and other institutes calls it differently. But the idea basically is to send the students to a village, and it's an experiential course where you live with the villagers, who do what they do, and that way you understand it thoroughly. But as the title itself said, it is only exposure. And so what does it exposure really do? It may not do much, but at least it made you aware that there is rural area which is existing in the country. Some of them don't even know. So to that extent, it helped. And over the years at NID, and after I had that, IDC and other schools have started. At least there are three important things have happened. That Javaja is one example which come to my mind, which is started by Ravi Mathai and Helena and Neelam. These leather workers, it ties to the, Ravi Mathai called it the Rural University, TRU. The other one is Kalaraksha, which is in Bhuj. It's for the textiles, started by Judy Freta. And there is also a Madanapalli, Vikram Purchare in Andhra Pradesh. Vikram Purchare started the pottery community development with design. These are some notable experiments which have yielded the result. But as I said, the country is so vast and the people are so many. And even these attempts, which are only helping the crafts area. What about agriculture? What about water, drinking water? What about medicine? What about education? What about, most importantly, sanitation? Not much is being done because it's been neglected. Yeah. So even crafts, that is another story I want to touch into. It's a very big, sad story what is happening in the crafts area. But let us stick to the villages. There is another good attempt. Again, it has started from Ahmedabad, and the credit goes to Professor Anil Gupta, who started at IIM Ahmedabad, National Innovation Foundation, to encourage with his honeybee network. He started collecting the ideas, innovative ideas from various villages, which is a marvelous effect. But an idea will remain like that in the bag unless it is designed, and design is the one which bridges the gap between the idea and the market. And that has not has happened because the design ability nobody has given to the rural people. That is where, so there are two important things I would like to concentrate on. One is the urbanization of design, ignoring the poor majority rural population. Another one is also happening, which we have to talk about, is that westernization. Mahatma Gandhi long back said that it's a famous quote that I would open all my windows of my house and let breeze from various countries flow freely into this, but I will see that I will not be blown off my feet. Many times we feel that, are we getting blown off our feet by the winds from the west or winds from the south? That is a big question. The other two things which are helping this is media, the TV, whether it is a TV or radio or film, is urban based. And they project only the urban problems. And then design became a fashionable commodity. Then, this word is important, I'm using, fashionable commodity, then fashioning beautiful thinking ability. So from being a verb, it has become a noun, which to me is very, very important aspect. There is also internal brain drain which is started. Actually, bright designers from villages, there are also bright people in villages. If they were given a chance, they go to cities, they study, and they become designers. And some of them are doing well for the society, but the problem is it is a brain drain from villages. It is a migration from rural to urban. I am one such example. All my colleagues who have joined NID in the beginning, they're pioneer educators of India, design educators, R.L. Mistry, Mahendra Patel, S.M. Shah, Narayan Bhai Patel. This list can go on, they're all from rural areas, but they all have now settled in cities. So to my mind, they're a loss to the villages from which they have come from. Now they can't go back. There are various factors, I don't want to discuss it here, but they cannot, it's like almost like one-way road. So this is the situation we are in. Now let me quickly come to the main topic, which is barefoot design. We all know one of the creative techniques is the 7-stage scamper, SCAMPER. In that, the third step is adopting. I thought adopting from the other field. Now, I have found something while in my studies for that. I have found something in China. China, in many ways, whether we like it or not, is very similar to India in its deep-rooted culture, in its population density, in its poverty, in its So it is comparable, and also therefore we can also look at the way they have sorted out their problems. So probably there is something we could learn. And one thing attracted me long back is that in 1950s, China was totally disease-ridden population, vast population. no hospitals, no, trained doctors. There is such, like, and 20% of people only urban, but all the concentration of doctors, training, schools, hospitals, they're all located in urban areas. So what will the 80% people do, particularly when there were terrible diseases spreading in the country? The China's Cultural Revolution was taking place, and in 1960s, the government has decided to attend to this. First, they said there are a few things which were kind of important in how they finally attended to the health problem of Chinese people. One is they started media health campaigns first, educating people how to prevent a disease. The next step only China can do because it's authoritarian country. They have ordered 1/3 of the doctors to work for rural areas for 5 to 10 years. Yeah. So otherwise they will be punished. Those who don't want to go and stay in rural areas, it is not easy if you are a city-based doctor to stay in villages. They said you can run mobile medical teams, and you can work that way also, you can serve the villages. Then the third one they did is recruiting and training village-based health workers. They were the ones given the title barefoot doctors because they were close to the soil. And agriculture, as in India, in China also, it's not a 12-month activity. As we all know, all farmers know that agriculture is seasonal activity. Other times people have to do something else to eke out a living. So they used that, and these barefoot doctors were trained during that period, during the lean periods, and continually, year after year after year. So their agriculture is not affected, but they do something to help the health of the community. And they also offered to motivate them. The Chinese government has also offered admission into medical schools for those health workers who have worked in villages. So this is the model which we are looking at. It occurred to me, if it works in medicine, if it works for doctors, why can't it work for designers? That is where the whole thing started. So I have been kind of talking about it and writing about it in my book, Thinking Design. I wrote about it. I don't know how many have read it. And even if you read it, how many have actually deeply given a serious thinking about it. I said, to attend to India's rural population and rural problems, in fact, there are more problems in villages than in urban cities where design institutes are located. But all our designers are basically in the urban areas. So I have taken a cue from Chinese barefoot doctor. I have coined this word barefoot designer. It's a kind of off-time education. Because here also, if we force the designers, you should go and for 1 month or 2 months work in villages, it will not happen. The government tried with doctors and it didn't happen because doctors don't go to villages because the facilities, the mosquitoes, there are umpteen problems there. We all know it. For an exposure course, it's all right. But if you have to stay there, it's unbearable. So that doesn't work. Then they will find out the corrupt ways of producing certificates that have been there getting getting some paper or something so that they can come out of this. So that is, the forcing is not an answer for anything. If you don't love it, you will not do it. You will find ways of side stepping it. So the model which I'm suggesting is this. Number one, each village nominates. The village knows their people better. And in village, as it happens, some people have an inclination towards innovation. Some people have an inclination towards design. Some people have a natural aesthetic sense. And we know it. They don't need to be literal. They don't need to know ABCD or alphabet. But they have this, the designers. Design is not a kind of literature activity. Literature is, design is doing. Therefore, the villages will select one or two, as many people as they can afford, to nominate inclined people. To do what? To be sent to the nearest design college, which is meant for training these people. They will be given inputs in design, and they will go there. This is very important. They won't go stay in the city for a longer time, because then they will lose touch with the village and they don't know what is happening. They will go only in the lean period when they have time. So they will continue their agriculture or smithy or some other work they are doing, but that will not suffer. They will go only in the lean period when the agricultural activity is not so much or not there at all, to this training, and they will be focused. What this training would include? The training should include focus on the local resources, local materials, whatever is available in that area. This is not same in whole country. What is available in Northeast is not available in Kerala. Whatever is available in Rajasthan is not available at all. So therefore, according to their area, which they know best, they would focus on understanding the materials, understanding the skills which the local people have, and then the design should focus on local problems. The local problems could be easily and effectively solved if you use local skills and local materials. And of course, aesthetics should not be ignored. They have to be with an aesthetic sense. And then design thinking applied to local problems. Design thinking, it's not a kind of, it's a thinking process applied. So any problem, could be, solved by using design thinking. So they would learn how to apply design thinking to solve their problems, the problems they know best. The urban designers or urban teachers will not be able to, really understand the depth of their problem. Then afterwards, what happens is they will be after a required training, which is achieved in 1 year or 2 years, they were without affecting their daily main activity. Then they will be, once they are fit, they will be sent back to the villages to train others. This is important because they are not there only to solve the village problems, but they are also there to propagate this and have a multiplier effect of getting some more people from that village and nearby villages and train them in design thinking and applying to their own problems, which may be different from this village. One village problem may not be different from the other village problem. And then they will also, each one will teach one, that is the idea. So then they will go back and again they will teach. So they will continue, this multiplier effect will continue and grow. Yeah. So that is the idea. There, the city design colleges work as seed farms. City design colleges are still necessary, and very competent teachers are necessary to teach these young boys from villages, boys and girls. And the seed farm will develop these villages. It needs few other things are needed to make this experiment successful. One is the government policies, incentives are needed in terms of materials, in terms of salaries, in terms of whatever way government can. Yeah. Cash is not the answer, but in many ways making this possible, where you need finances, but government, instead of giving directly cash, but it would give in kind, that will help the project to be successful. Then we also need certainly the media support. Media, whether it is a film or TV or whatever, so media is very, very powerful in brainwashing and in positive way brainwashing also. So therefore, we have to counter. Right now, brainwashing is happening in a negative way because most of it is coming from the West and with a commercial angle to it. So it is making people buy what they don't want, this kind of way. But this could be, we have not realized the power of the media and we are not taking advantage of this. And this has to be done with a focus on villages. With a focus on, earlier ISRO has started PIDGE example, many of you may be knowing it, but it is unfortunately closed down using satellite technology. But this kind of thing should happen again with the focus on rural areas, rural TV, rural radio, and all rural films, which do not grandiose or glamorize the village, but show the real problems as they are. Manthan is one film by Shyam Benegal long back, which has come, but not many films have come afterwards. So this should be done. The media support is essential. Then what should be the curriculum like? Who will make the curriculum? I would think curriculum should be a participatory. The villagers themselves who know the thing better, they should sit with the teachers in cities, and a curriculum should be, they should help the teachers to evolve a curriculum which is useful and which is which addresses their problems their way. So these 10 points we have put down here. This is the idea of barefoot design. Now, this is only ad hoc, in my opinion, is a kind of stopgap arrangement. In fact, if we want a permanent and a long-lasting solution for it, I feel that it should be creation of design thinking in the primary schools, which are all over the country, urban areas as well as rural areas. And wherever they are, the design thinking should be applied to their own problems which they are surrounded with. If it is urban, if it is urban problem. If it is a village school, it should be a village problem. So if it is a tribal area, it is a tribal problem. But primary education, everybody is at least supposed to have. So if design thinking as a process is part of this primary school curriculum, that would feel good. I feel it's a long-term solution. Once it becomes part of that, we will have a kind of permanently used this design thinking into everybody, rural, urban, tribal, any area. And I think design has a potential to help people at that level. And this glamorization and glossy idea of design, this show-off kind of thing should stop, because it is going to lot of damage than good to the design profession. Yeah, I love being in the spotlight and being on TV and being on all those music and all that. But I feel that it will scare away villagers. Like a 5-star hotel will scare away from villager entering into it because he won't even think of entering into it, even if you offer something which is very relevant to him. So in the same way, we are, by projecting design as a kind of a glamorous, grandiose, glossy profession, we are actually preventing a section of our society from approaching us. I think this has to be somehow, media has to, I'm not saying grandiose and glamour is wrong, but this should be, that's only one-sided view. And we always keep saying that design is a problem-solving process. And, but the projection is not saying so. Projection is, putting it as a commercial, a very, high-profile commercial, that too, activity. So that has to be, somehow attended. So I think that's what all I wanted to say. Now, I would be happy if there are any questions. Akshaya?
Yes, sir. I'm here.
Are there any questions?
Yes, sir. I have one for you. So there's a question from Saumi Pal. So how manual and mass production, urban and rural, and all these points, how they are benefiting, but a problem?
You see, production we all need. Production is there. Only the means, which are either you produce by machine, which produces maybe 1,000 pieces a day, or you produce by man who produces a 1 piece a day, but 1,000 people working on it. It ultimately comes to that. I don't see any, conflict in that. Whether it is a mass production by machine or a production by mass of people. You see, so it's only what it means is, in some countries, considering their economy and their population density, we should think of which production we should adopt. We have taken some time back this decision of, because the West has gone industrialization, we also should go industrialization. Is that a right decision? Should we have so much of mass production? We should have mass production by mass production machines, or we should have mass production by masses, which are common people. 1,000 people, as I said earlier, 1,000 people producing an article, that also makes 1,000 pieces a day, or one machine produces 1,000 pieces a day. It is the same, except in this case, except the machine operator, 999 people have no work. This has been pointed out by Mahatma Gandhi long time back. That's why he went to Charkha and all that, but he has been grossly misunderstood as a kind of very backward thinking person. He was not. You see, the unemployment is a big, big, question for population dense countries, whether it is China, Russia, or India, or Brazil. That is going to stay because human beings are human beings. Today we are all facing the migration, the problems with the migration labor. So this problem has to be attended because it's a human problem. Yeah. Or probably for a country like India, if that's the question, we need both of them simultaneously. Then we can have bullock cart as well as Chandrayaan or rocket science. We can also have mass production as well as manual production. But the thing is, manual production is kind of, because of the problems, human beings always problems. Machines don't give a problem. That kind. Yeah. So we go for mass production, machine production. I call it machine production. But is that the right thing to do? This is something for the policy planners to, take a look at.
Thank you, sir. So the next question is from Nikita. So how do we strike a balance between rural and urban kind of design?
See, there is no question of striking a balance. The world is wide. Some people who want to work on, in urban areas also there are problems, in rural areas also there are problems. Some people who want to work in urban areas should work in urban areas for urban problems. But right now, what I'm pointing out is rural areas are neglected. They are not, their problems are more acute, but they are not attended. We are only actually, giving them some lollipops and making them a little happy so that they don't make noise. But the problems are not attended. Bharat Singh and many others in the country are doing it. They know much better than me to comment on it. Drinking water is a big problem still in many villages. Electricity is a big problem in villages. Sanitation is a big problem in villages. These are basic necessity problems. But we don't know because we have not experienced it. I go to my village and I experience it. I know what the problem is. But still, I'm not able to do much about it. So, but if we focus on it, if we are first aware of it, that we can go. There are people who are doing this. Jinan has done it, and Sandeep Sangaru has done it. There are many people who are doing it. This, and hats off to them. But it's a kind of sacrifice on the part of these people. Why should that be a sacrifice? And that also, given the size of our country, 1.2 billion people, these efforts of individuals like Vikram Porchere, Neelam Iyer, Ravi Mathai, Judy Frater, etc., they're minimal, they're hardly, they're a drop in the ocean. What I'm saying is, can we increase that? Can we, it can't be done just by the designers alone, but if the design associations will make a resolve, if the National Design Council, now we have India Design Council, if they make a resolve, and if the policy planning of the government would make a decision, so we can certainly do something for the villages. The idea is that design is considered as just a fashionable, glamorous activity, or design is considered as a real problem solving, which is needed much more in villages. That has not yet come through. Many people are thinking that design is an urban activity. Even villagers think that it's an urban activity. Yeah. When I go to my village, people don't understand. He is an urban fellow who had come just to, like a touristic interest. Few days he will spend here and then go back. And that is what actually happens also. So, but we are not really doing that. There are people who have done it, but they have sacrificed quite a bit. Bankur Roy and many others, we all know. But there is no serious governmental effort in this. Design is not yet seen, I hold that design is not yet seen as a problem-solving activity by the planners and policymakers and the governmental bodies in this country. So villages are, languishing. So this is where the balance you are talking about. If you want a balance, you work for urban areas as well as work for rural areas. So you charge more from the rural, the urban areas where they can afford to, and probably you work for free for the rural areas so that your conscience will be happy, and urban area clients will give you, your bread and butter. This is what some people do that. This is if this is what you mean a balance. If you're an urban designer, but still you want to do something for the rural areas, so devote some of your time to solve the rural areas. But you can't solve. You don't make the mistake like Victor Popnek did in your design, in his book Design for the Real World. You can't look at the village problem from the outside. You have to go there, live with them and stay with them for some time till you understand. In the last webinar, as I said, you hear, you forget, you see, you know, but if you do, you will understand. So you have to do it. In our village, what we call living with people course, I insist on the students living with, not only living there in the village, but also do what the villagers do. Then you will understand.
Thank you, sir. The next question is from Padmini ma'am. So what is your idea about materials used by machines versus materials used by hand production? Which saves more environment?
The answer is not difficult to find. Of course, hand materials which are used by hand will save the environment. We all know that, because you will not otherwise use the material. So the hand knows what is good for it. But once you use the very detached, impersonal machine can do anything. Yeah, it doesn't, because it doesn't have a heart. When human beings make something, they have a heart and they feel what is the ultimate good or bad about that. If something is you are a dyer, Padmini. So if you have a dye which burns your fingers, you won't use that dye anymore. That chemical, you won't put it. But the same thing in a mechanical way, in a mechanical water, in a machine that could go. Because for the machine, it doesn't matter. So therefore, myself and Neelam have done a survey of, palm tree, which is abundant, wild tree. Nobody plants them, but they grow. And they're very hardy plants. And there, the South India is blessed with the palm trees. Tamil Nadu, Andhra, and part of Karnataka. So we made a survey and we found this, nobody cares for this palm. But we found suddenly they're exporting some material. The Khadi village industries are exporting. I said, where are they exporting? It took us a long time to find out that they're exporting to Germany. Because Germany is using it in the dairy industry, where to clean the milk is very sticky thing, no? To clean the machines where the milk is, flown through, and they to be cleaned, they're using palm brushes, which are imported from India. Whereas we just throw away. Our palm and our coconut, this thing is just burnt off, maximum. Yeah, we are also, choir board is doing something with the choir, but palm is actually not intended to. What I'm saying is, if the other people know the value and it's for environment which is good, we are not actually aware of it. We use still plastic cleaners to clean our milk making machines, plastic brushes. This is what. So if you use hand, I'm sure you are aware of what is happening. The machine could be impersonal and machine could be killer. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. So the next question is from uh, from a problem solving perspective, a designer looks for product environment interface. In this context, what is the stake for color preferences?
Color?
Preferences.
Color preferences vary from, yeah, color preferences to my mind is very cultural. So the color preference of a particular community or people depends on the cultural background of that particular community. Yeah, it is. So this is what you have to go according to the culture of that area. What is good? The colors preferred in Bengal are not preferred in Tamil Nadu. So it varies, and particularly in India, it varies because we, as I said earlier, ours is a pluralistic country. The cultures, we have got at least 20 to 30 different cultures. So it has to go culture. I have experienced this. You can't have one color preference or one form preference for the whole country. They vary. The form, the color, the texture, the preferences for them are varied because we are made one way. Even if the same ingredients, still there is a difference. The coffee which South Indians used to in Tamil Nadu, even if the same coffee, same ingredients, which is if it is made in Gujarat or somewhere, it's not the same.
Thank you, sir. So the next question is from Chandra. So can we think of redesigning the city, town, village structure as a different form? The thought of designing for the village where everyone has access to all facilities, but each have their own specific roles.
Yeah, that's really good idea. Long time back, a great man, Christopher Alexander, has worked on a village. He worked on a village, map, how a village should be. And it's a beautiful thing. It has become a kind of standard textbook kind of thing because he's a great architect. But villages, we all know villages have kind of organically have grown. Nobody has designed a village. But it is possible to design a village where things are designed according to the needs of the people and the professions they do and all that. Yes, it is possible today. But for that, you understand the village first, and the villagers, their psychology first. Sometime back, we designed a very lightweight bullock cart, and we took it to the villagers. But the villagers rejected it because they didn't have trust in the aluminum, however strong your tests prove it to be. So it is psychology. We have to first understand the psychology of the villages, which is quite different from the psychology of the city people and urban.
Thank you, sir. So the next question is from Saurav. So this is a big question. So the villages in India lack basic amenities like electricity, running water, nutritious food, proper sanitation, etc. How can design solve problems such as these, which are supposed to be taken care by the government? And how can we begin to solve other problems before tackling these basic problems? And there is a follow-up question also. Isn't government welfare intervention required before a design intervention in villages of India?
It's a long question. It also requires a long answer, but I will try to make it short. See, there are two things in it. Government has its role. certainly. But we also can't leave everything to the government because it is such a vast country. So we should be self-reliant. So a village people should try to solve their problems, but it also goes without saying in a democracy, if a government is not doing, you can't dump the whole problem on the government to solve it, but you want to solve it, you know the problem better, but the government should support it with policies and framework. That you can demand. If any government doesn't do it, you have all the right to kick the government out. Yeah, it's not easy, but it's not difficult. It's not impossible. But yeah, that is the extreme case. But right now, my observation is that the policymakers are oblivious of the fact. Probably to give them due respect, that they're too concerned with the basic problems like food, food security, shelter, education, health, and all that. Yeah, I understand that. But meanwhile, the problems cannot be held on till they solve it, because it's already 70 years, after the independence. So we have to do something for the villages. So what I am saying is, don't wait for the government to do something. You start doing something. There are many villages have done that way. You start doing that way, and then designers can be a huge assistance in that effort which the villages will start. This is what I'm saying. And then the government has to be pulled down to you, help me with this, help me with that. Don't just dole out some thousands of rupees or loan waivers on us, which makes us immediately thieves and beggars. This the villager, I'm talking, as I'm also a villager, but this is not the right way. Why should I accept the government's money? And why should I accept, non-refundable loans and all that? Why should I? I also have my dignity, right? This dignity should not be taken out from the villages, but they do need help. So there, if you say to the government, we are doing this, water is not there in my village, and we are doing this, why don't you give this, or why don't you support this by giving X, Y, and Z? I'm sure many governments will do that, because there is no excuse not to do. We should put them in such a condition. Because if you just ask money, the government will also suspect, is it going to the right hands? Is there a corruption in it? There are many other things which will come in.
Yes, sir.
Stands the saying the other day we were talking about, don't give man a fish, you solve his problem only for that moment. But teach them how to fish, then you have solved it for a longer time. There is a lot of wisdom in this thing. But teaching how to fish also needs some infrastructure, some kind of expense. There we can ask, on that specifics, we can ask the government, we are doing this, why don't you do this? I'm learning how to fish, you at least give me the fishing rod. That kind of thing. And there, I think, the government is obliged to do that.
Thank you, sir. So the next question is from Suvarna. So it's a brilliant idea to be more inclusive and empowering. The solutions are imposed many a times without their voice in the process. Facilitators from design education is a big challenge since they are majorly Western and urban oriented. How do we address this?
Yeah, as I mentioned, participatory design, there is a word which has come up. That is the only, kind of a brilliant way of attending this. We normally discard illiterate people as brainless, which is wrong. You don't know how to, read alphabets doesn't mean your brain is not. Some of them are much sharper than the Pandits who can read 100 books. So we should not underestimate the lack of signing ability as lack of thinking ability. That we must all, many times we make this mistake. This fellow is illiterate, so he doesn't know anything, which is wrong way of looking at illiteracy. Illiteracy only right now, the way it is defined is that whether you know how to sign your name or not, which is ridiculous. So it is not a measure of your intellectual capacity. I learned many things from the illiterate people. And my, father, grandfather was illiterate, but I have learned so many things from them. Yeah. So this is, if that goes and this Brahmanism of designers go, and we look at, you go to the villager in a, in an attitude of learning from him. Designers have to learn from him because he knows better his problem, as I said already. So if we have that attitude, then he will open up and he will tell you. If you go him, you are dumb, I know what is better for you. Many times, many designers go with this particular arrogance. I will tell you what is good for you. So, of course, you don't know because you are not there with the problem. Whereas he has been with the problem, not only his generation, but his father's generation, his forefather, his grandfather's generation, and even before that. So it is in his blood. So how can you ever replace it? So to my mind, participatory, that's why I mentioned in my presentation that the curriculum should be learned from the villagers in a participatory way. You cannot sitting in a city in your own library and in your comfortable office, you can't decide a curriculum. The curriculum has to be evolved by the people who are actually going through. We have done some of these experiments in Ahmedabad when there were floods and they devastated the slums. The slum development at that time, Kirti Shah was there. Under his leadership, we have done a participatory. We asked the slum people who have lost their shelters what kind of new shelter they want to have, and they have given some marvelous suggestions. So, but first of all, the designers should leave their bloated egos aside. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of making an implied statement that designers have bloated egos, but all of them don't have, but some of them do have, and they do a lot of damage to design profession. So if you leave that and if you go to the villager that you want to learn from you, because I'm working on a problem which is your problem, you know that better, you tell me. And then he will be happy to tell. And that is the way we should, we have to have learn, way of learning. Learning will never happen as long as you have the distance that you know better. If you're already full, that example of if your cup is already full, nobody can put anything in it. And particularly the villages, I'm telling with my own experience, in villages, the urban designers know very, very little. So they have to learn. There's nothing wrong in learning. It's not making yourself low.
Thank you, sir. So the next question is from Lakshana Ravishankar. So how do you think that the glamorization of design start in the first place? And how is it that other fields have not been commercialized as much as design?
Interesting question, made me think. I think glamorization started because the way design has emerged. You see, after the World War, as you know, there is short supply of materials, and so we are actually drained out of materials, and we are looking for some cheap products. Then cheap products started coming with mass production, but then They have no heart, they have no beauty. They're cheap, but they're ugly, positively ugly. So people could not tolerate it. So there are movements have started, arts and crafts movement and many other movements. I don't want to bore you with the design history, but because of this, the way it has come basically to beautify products. So the beauty has to be there. You see, you don't, anything which we do in life, if there is no beauty, you don't, feel like using it, or you cannot use it. Beauty is that sweetness, that nectar. It will make you to take to anything in life, and this is a marvelous thing. And so designers have started with beauty. What happened, unfortunately, is beauty is understood many a time as glamour. Glamour is a very superficial beauty. Beauty, I was telling, we can talk hours together on beauty. The real beauty is, I sometimes say, if Tendulkar made a shot and you will say, oh, what a beauty. That is, to me, is beauty. It's not physical you're talking about a quality. If somebody sang a song so well, your soul is actually lifted up, and there is some music like that, then you will say, oh, what a beauty. That beauty is not physical beauty. It is something beyond physical. It's not even just the song. It is the way it is said. Even sometimes people speak and then you will feel what a beautiful way it is said. So that kind of beauty is what design is concerned with. I still think that design is concerned with beauty, but we don't separate the beauty and function and all that. When I said the Tendulkar, shot, is there no function in it? Of course there is function. But beauty is something which is beyond function. So function has to be there, but it should be something more than that. Yeah. Then you will say it is real beauty. Lotta is, Charles said about it. Yeah, of course it's a functional product, but there is something beyond just looking good or just working. So you want to keep looking at it just to get that pleasure. And this is, beauty. That's how, so the glamorization has come like that, but the commercialization has taken away the charm of beauty. So commercialization is aggressively saying that only superficial beauty is beauty. The makeup beauty is beauty. That is where designers are caught. And designers are misunderstood that design is glamour. And the functional beauty is not even, looked at. I believe personally that which works better looks better, which looks better works better. There is an inherent relationship. So the glamorization has come, for various factors, mainly probably fashion industry, which has to have a new fashion every year. So, the spotlight has been put, the show has to go on. These things have been probably overdone, but people are now thinking that is the only design. That is design, surely. But that's not the only design. Everything is not that kind. Fashion has to be certain way. It has to be certain way. The show is important for it. It is important for it. But if I'm designing a big stove, there's no show. It has to work. It has to save the fuel, but it should also look beautiful. If it is ugly, I can't give it to someone to use it. However efficient it is. This is where I think this is not understood by the public in general. So the public perception has to be changed. Right now, what I said in my talk, the public perception is design is glamorous activity. And many people actually are coming here, many girls, particularly, this is a kind of once in South, learning dance Bharatanatyam or Kuchipudi is a kind of, you get a better rating in your matrimonials. You don't laugh at it, but it was true. Some time back, Rukmini Devi Arundel has to face this flag. Yeah, but it's not a real interest, but they want to, have some kind of culture or glamour attached to their personality. But in design also, the way I see now, thousands of people are, getting into schools, design schools and passing out. I feel that somewhere it's not real interest, but it's a kind of brand interest. That is, I am a designer, I'm a design graduate. So my value in a matrimonial market or some other market is increased. But that I'm not talking about that. That's not a real design. So the glamour has come because of the over commercialization, and partly, with the due apologies, I will say, fashion design, which is promoted aggressively. There is a fashion channel. There are many other things, but there is no design channel. There is no design really, except BBC and others. There is no place where design can have a real, show its real face.
Thank you, sir. So the next question is from an anonymous. So, can a BDES graduate work in a government job?
What graduate, sorry?
BDES graduate.
B design graduate work in a
government job.
Why not? What is the problem? You see, you still, if you have your heart in the right place, you can work in any. You push. If the question, if I understood rightly, government or private, you see, you have to push your idea to your satisfaction. Don't compromise beyond a limit. Then if you compromise beyond a limit for money or power or whatever it is, I don't really advise, because in the end you will feel not really peaceful about it. I keep telling my students that a good bed is more important than a good chair. What I mean, chair is the power and fame and all other things the chair offers. But what I mean by bed is that the peace, the tranquility, the rest and the relaxation, etc., the peacefulness, which the bed offers. I would always advise people to have a good bed than a good chair.
Thank you, sir. So the next question is from Dr. Shravani. Designers also display a kind of attitude when they go to rural craftsmen. Does that leaves an impression that design is something urban?
This is exactly what I said in my talk. We display an attitude, sometimes unknowingly. I'm not blaming, we do it knowingly. Probably nobody does it knowingly, but unknowingly. But this craftsman is sensitive enough to get the vibes of it, and he thinks this man thinks he is above me, he thinks more than me, and all that. And just because you have more money, finally he comes to a conclusion. Sometimes the craftsman, knowing your arrogance, forgives you and does the work you said because he needs that money to survive. But in his heart of hearts, he knows that you are displaying, a kind of high and mighty attitude. That's not good for his dignity, and that's not good in the long run. We have to respect their years of experience and wisdom which they have, their families and, families for generations together, many of them. So that can't be, just brushed off just because you went to NID or, some other great school, Royal College of Art or somewhere, and you come back. Still, you will not know the village problem as good as he knows. And design starts with, we all say, empathy. And how will you have empathy unless you put yourself in his shoes? And that won't come immediately. And if you have arrogance and high and mighty attitude, it will never come. Empathy is going down to the person's level and put your foot in his shoes. And for that, you have to go down to his level. I would say even lesser level, because he is the one who knows more about the problem than you. You may know how to solve it. But first you should know what the problem is. Otherwise you will, give the medicine for the wrong patient or for the wrong illness. This is what many times is happening. Craftsmen tolerate it because many times I have seen many designers acting as a middleman, at the most, good middleman. So you know where the designers know where the markets are, and they disregard the creative ability of the craftsman. And they will simply say, you do this way, you do this way, I'm a designer, I know it. Yeah, that craftsman want to say something different. He has his own ideas, but he will keep his mouth shut because he needs the money which you give. And that is not getting the best out of a craftsman. If you respect him, you give him a little respect for his years of generations of experience, he will open up and he will tell you, this is this way. You may agree, you may not agree, but at least you have listened to him. Many times I have seen designers don't even listen to him. They only listen to themselves. This is where the problem comes. With craftsmen, in life also, that's what, if you only listen to yourself, you will be alone. You'll be an only man or woman.
Thank you, sir. So the next question is that, in this context, do you believe that access to good design is a privilege and that the formalist design education present in our world is a privilege?
Yeah, my views may not be the end of it. The aesthetics, is a very dicey subject. And aesthetics is very subjective. And so you can't have one universal rule about aesthetics. And aesthetics is one important element, but we don't recognize that it varies. It varies. There is some common ground, but within that there are variations. The rose is beautiful in general, but no rose is same as the other rose. Yeah, and you like one kind of rose, and somebody else likes another kind of rose, and both the roses are beautiful. But this we should understand. There is a basic understanding on ugliness and the lack of aesthetics or lack of beauty. But within that bottom line, above it, there will be different kind of flowers, so there are different kind of aesthetics, and they all have equal validity, equal value. Black, now we are saying black is beautiful, once black is considered as ugliness. That's a kind of unmindfulness. So there is a beauty in black, there is a beauty in brown, there is a beauty in kind of skin color as well as facial features. So we must recognize, if you are a good designer, you shouldn't have a dogma or you shouldn't be an absolutist. Then you are not a good designer. They're a good designer. There are as many variations as possible, even in aesthetics. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, sir. So the next question is from Nilesh. So, Naithalam of Gandhi appears to be similar to what you refer to taking design education to primary schooling. Any designers spend time to understand why it has failed? What has been the outcome of this?
He's talking about Naya Talim?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a kind of a fan of Mahatma Gandhi. I have got great respect for some of his ideas. Naya Talim is an excellent idea. It had its own kind of virtue in Gandhi's time, because Gandhi's charisma has worked on it, and the respect people have for Gandhi, they all have worked on it. But once Gandhi is out of scene, Gandhi's ideas also have one by one have been kind of neglected and even thrown out. So Naya Talim also, although it's an excellent idea, it is kind of, it has been tried in Bardoli and other places with some success, but afterwards it couldn't take further, because you see, we all, whether we like it or not, let us accept it. We have one kind of education system which gives us degrees and certificates and all that, which will take us. So we all are kind of stuck up in that system. Anything which is new is very difficult for us to, pursue further. You can probably up to say primary school you can do it, but secondary school you have to have, or till high school you can do it, but afterwards you can't do it, because this is what Naya Talim is, vocational kind of training. So Gandhi said, why can't the villagers learn what they do daily? It's an excellent idea. But there is no certificate, there is no degree, there is no other things which the world values it, quote unquote. So everybody has gone for what the world values, because you will be left out otherwise. You will be out of the system. So it is the system which has not given its propulsion. Naya Talim has not been given a propulsion. It has to be given by the government. There are many agencies which could have done it, but it's not been done. It is kind of tried experimental way, and then afterwards the experiment is closed.
Thank you, sir.
Basically, there are no kind of champions for it. Every activity goes by a champion. Krishnamurti school, J. Krishnamurti schools are a success because there are followers, they are champions. And during Krishnamurti's time, he saw to it that they are established well, by good people and all that. But Gandhi, being Gandhi, he has so many activities, he was not able to do it. And afterwards, the foundations and the Gandhians have slowly, one by one, they all have died. And now there are hardly any Gandhians left in the country. So it has taken a natural death. Unless somebody from the young people now comes back, takes to that philosophy, takes that ideology, and champion it. We don't have to look every time for the government to do it, because something's better done by others than government. You know what I mean?
Thank you, sir. So I think we have come to the last question. So this is from Piyush. What do you think the importance of universal design as in the near future? Is something can be truly universal?
Yeah, the first part of the question is absolutely necessary in the future because more and more people are actually having different abilities. Yeah, universal design is basically, as you all know, there are people who are not the same. Even a simple thing like right-handers and left-handers, or people who have, some, problem with their, walking or their speaking or their, various other things, because this is nature. To have differences is natural, and we should embrace the difference and not hate the difference or eliminate the difference or look down upon the difference. This is, for years we have looked down on left-handers as they are, they are odd people. They're not odd people, they're more creative people. So in the same way, so universal design in future will be more because there are more and more people having illnesses and permanent, permanent disabilities of one form or the other. Epilepsy is on the high, polio is on the high, thalassemia is on the high, dyslexic is on the high. There are many things. There are mental and physical disorders, but they all are still human beings, and they have to be, together with other human beings. We can't put them away in some ghettos. I'm against it. That's why I started, taking up universal design in every design school I started. Sometime like I'm never going to leave. But in future, universal design is, more. They will demand it because there will be also voters, and they will not vote for anybody who doesn't support them. So it will be a big, thing. If you don't give them without asking, then they will demand it. Then you have to give it. They will go to court. Yeah, and they will do all kinds of things. So for the first question, my answer is universal design is inevitable. All design schools in the country have to sooner or later have universal design course. And universal design has to be practiced in admissions. Even if somebody is dyslexic or mentally retarded one way or other, you have to take him. A slow learner or fast learner, ADHD syndrome, all these things are coming up. But this is a human society. So with its variations, we have to take them. We have taken short people as well as tall people. In the same way, we have to take somebody who is fast learner or slow learner. Now we have to, give the curriculums have to have the flexibility to accept all kinds of human beings because they're human beings. Yeah. The other question is, the second part of the question is, what could be done? What is the second part? Can you repeat?
Hello? Yes, sir, sure. 1 second. If something can be truly be universal.
Yeah, okay. I think the answer to this is no. In the sense that there is no universal medicine. There is no one dress fits all. There is nothing in that sense. If you are thinking universal, something cannot be universal. Differences are going to be there. Yeah. And I think, as I said earlier, I think that is good. My face should not look like your face. Why should it be? Why should it be? There should be difference only then we like each other. If everything is like a clone, if everybody is looking like everybody, however good it is, then you start hating each other. Variety is beauty. Variety is spice of life. It's always said. So from that sense, there is no universality. Yeah. But what we are saying is what we said universal design is different from what we are talking right now. One dress doesn't fit all, but we should be conscious of various variations in body and design something which takes those variations. It should fit not everybody. It should be flexible enough to For example, a stretchable waist pants nowadays they're coming, they fit anyone. So one has to, designers have to think, but you can't have one thing which fits all. You don't try to force people into that one thing at all. So universality is, universal design should be there. Universality should not be forced upon. We should cater for differences because we are made different. No leaf is the same as the other leaf. No human being is same as the other human. So why should we go against nature?
Thank you, sir. And I think we have come to the end. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for this wonderful
Thank
time.
you for
And
making it interesting.
yes, the participants have come up with wonderful questions. I think that made it very interesting. Thank you so much, sir. And I thank the participants also. So this webinar's video and the previous webinar's video will be available in the Facebook page. So if anyone wants to refer, they can go and check at any time. And we will be having our 7th one, the series, next weekend by June 15th. So until then, everybody have a great weekend. Thank you, sir.
Actually, I would love to have some feedback after you look at the videos.
Yes, yes, sir. Yeah, they can send their feedbacks at contacts@scid.ac.in. I think we have been getting a few feedbacks also. So from the past
I would like
webinars.
to improve and I would like to correct if some things are not.
Sure, sir, great. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone.